Thank you for watching. I'm Shakil 5858. I am Ahmed Budnam. I am thankful to all news resources and my team for their cooperation. Following are the news which have been reported by American, European, Canadian, African, Asian channels and also the news agencies, Reuters, AFP, AP. Now the news in detail. Rather, news headlines. Allies of Israel are urging Israel to restrain from attacking Iran. Former President Donald Trump appeared in New York court, making the history. This appearance was related to hush money case. A sitting with Ukrainian president. America will not support Israel in retaliation. The ship which hit Baltimore Bridge had electrical problems. Weapons supervisor of movie set sent to jail. A case against Black Lives Matters activist in Supreme Court. Gender caring case of Idaho. Sudan got aid support. French president supports this move. A 15-year-old attacked people in Australia. A second incident in 3 days. Tesla decreased 10% global force. Mr. Biden income tax return. Boston Marathon. On Wall Street, Dow Jones down, S&P 500 down, and Nasdaq also down. Now the news in detail.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is calling for maximum restraint after Iran launched 300 drones and missiles at Israel in retaliation for Israel's recent bombing of the Iranian consulate in Damascus. The Iranian attack caused little damage after Israel intercepted nearly all of the drones and missiles with help from the United States, Britain, France, and Jordan. One 7-year-old Bedouin girl in Israel was seriously injured in the attack after she was hit by shrapnel. While Iran and Israel have been engaged in a shadow war for years, this marked the first time Iran has directly targeted Israel from Iranian soil. The UN Secretary General spoke Sunday at an emergency UN Security Council meeting.
The Middle East is on the brink. The people of the region are confronting a real danger of a devastating full-scale conflict. Now is the time to defuse and de-escalate. Now is the time for maximum restraint.
Israeli War Cabinet member Benny Gantz has vowed Israel will retaliate against Iran.
In the face of the Iranian threat, we will build a regional coalition and exact the price from Iran in the fashion and timing that is right for us.
President Biden has reiterated his ironclad support for Israel, but he reportedly told Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that the United States will not participate in any retaliatory strikes against Iran. At the United Nations Sunday, Iran's UN ambassador, Saeed Iravani, defended the missile and drone attack on Israel, saying it was done in self-defense.
These countries, especially the United States, have shielded Israel from any responsibility for the Gaza massacre, while they have denied Iran inherent right to self-defense against the Israeli armed attack on our diplomatic premises. At the same time, they shamefully justified the Israeli massacre and genocide against the defenseless Palestinian people under the pretext of self-defense.
We'll go to Tehran, Washington, D.C., and Tel Aviv after headlines. Israel is continuing its assault on Gaza, where the official death toll has reached 33,800. On Sunday, Israeli forces opened fire on displaced Palestinians who were attempting to return to their homes in northern Gaza. Israel also bombed the Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza, killing at least 5 people and injuring dozens. In the occupied West Bank, armed settlers attacked the Palestinian village of Al-Mutahir, at least 10 other villages. It's been described as the largest settler rampage against Palestinians in the West Bank since October 7th. The violence in the West Bank began after the disappearance of an Israeli teenager who was later found dead after being killed in what Israel called a terrorist attack. Palestinian authorities say the settlers burned down dozens of homes and structures. One Palestinian was killed, dozens injured, when residents of Al-Mutahir condemned the settler violence.
My son was injured. My nephew was injured. Most of the people here were injured. They burnt the cars. They tried to open the houses to burn them. They could not, so they damaged everything they could. The water tanks, not leaving anything unharmed. It lasted between 2 to 3 hours. Then they started moving to the other houses, heading west. They burnt houses, vehicles, and they took sheep. They went on until the end of the village, not leaving one house unharmed, with no reason, claiming that there's a settler that has gone missing.
Here in New York City, the first ever criminal trial of a U.S. president starts today as jury selection gets underway in Donald Trump's hush money case. The former president is charged with 34 felony counts of falsifying business records to hide a $130,000 payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels to influence the 2016 election. On Friday, Trump told reporters he intends to testify during the trial. We'll have more on the trial later in the show. We'll be speaking with defense attorney Ron Kuby. Today marks 1 year since the devastating war in Sudan erupted. An estimated 15,000 people have been killed, another 8.6 million forcibly displaced in what the UN calls one of the worst displacement and humanitarian crises in the world and one of the most ignored, unquote. The Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, have both been accused of war crimes as the conflict shows no signs of abating. Widespread sexual violence, indiscriminate attacks, targeting of health facilities, and the restriction of aid has left communities across Sudan shattered with dwindling resources to support them. Safa Abdul Muttaleb is now in South Sudan after her family was forced to flee Khartoum.
It was very, very difficult. For a long period, we were hiding under our beds, no food, no water, no help. The bombs came from all sides, especially where we lived. It was extremely difficult as we were surrounded by army bases and military industrial complexes.
The RSF has also been accused of ethnic cleansing and the targeting of non-Arab groups, including the ethnic Masalit community. The UN is calling on countries to step up funding for Sudan, where some 25 million people are in dire need of assistance. France is hosting a conference in Paris today with the goal of securing aid pledges from European countries. In Australia, police say the man who went on a deadly stabbing rampage at a Sydney shopping centre Saturday was likely targeting women. 5 of the 6 fatal victims were women. The one man killed by the assailant was a security guard who attempted to stop the attack. The stabber was eventually shot and killed by police. Some 20 people overall were stabbed, including a 9-month-old baby girl. The baby survived, but her mother did not. The mass killing at the Westfield Bondi Junction has rattled Australia, where mass casualty events are rare. On Capitol Hill, the House voted Friday to reauthorize Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance, or FISA Act, which has been used by federal agencies to conduct warrantless surveillance of Americans. The House vote came just days after a group of Republicans temporarily blocked a move to extend the law after Donald Trump urged lawmakers to kill the bill. Democratic Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon denounced the House bill, saying it, quote, represents one of the most dramatic and terrifying expansions of government surveillance authority in history, Wyden said. Vice President Kamala Harris told voters in Tucson, Arizona, Donald Trump is responsible for Arizona's recent revival of an 1864 abortion ban.
All must understand who is to blame. Former President Donald Trump did this. During his campaign in 2016, Donald Trump said women should be punished for seeking an abortion. Don't forget that. He said women should be punished.
Vice President Harris made the remarks in her second visit this year to the key battleground state of Arizona. In related news, organizers in Colorado say they've collected enough signatures to add a measure to the November ballot calling for enshrining abortion access in Colorado's constitution. Arizona activists also plan to add an amendment on abortion rights to their state's ballot. Police in Germany raided and shut down a pro-Palestinian conference in Berlin Friday. The Palestine Congress was scheduled to be held for 3 days, but the event was shut down as the first panelist spoke. In addition, Germany's Interior Ministry banned some conference speakers from even entering Germany or addressing it remotely, including former Greek Finance Minister Yanis Varoufakis and the Palestinian-British surgeon Hassan Abu Satta, who worked in Gaza. Dr. Abu Satta spoke to Middle East Eye after he was barred entry.
Upon arrival, I was stopped at the passport office. I was then escorted down to the basement of the airport, where I was questioned for around 3.5 hours. At the end of 3.5 hours, I was told that I will not be allowed to enter German soil.
To see Democracy Now's interview with the doctor after he came out of Gaza, go to democracynow.org. German authorities defended the decision to shut down the conference, citing German laws against so-called hate speech. And here in the United States, the political theorist Jodi Dean has been relieved of teaching duties while officials at Hobart and William Smith colleges investigate her writings on Gaza. Dean recently wrote a blog post on the Verso website in defense of Palestinian resistance. On Saturday, she wrote a message on social media saying, quote, McCarthyism is real. I've been relieved of teaching responsibilities. Don't stop talking about Palestine, she said. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
Tonight, heightening hostilities. Israel vows to respond to Iran's unprecedented attack.
Iran will face the consequences for its actions.
Deliberations over the time and scope of a retaliation.
Please take the win.
And the urgent global push for de-escalation. The difficult search for an impartial jury in former U.S. President Donald Trump's historic hush money trial.
You should apologize to these service members.
Plus, a police chief's promise to repair trust and the clash at a dramatic press conference. Also, bracing for predicted tax hikes ahead of tomorrow's federal budget. And tackling addiction with art.
It kind of looked like you were actually inside your brain.
The immersive dome bringing brain education to children in the North.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening, everyone, and great to be back with you. The world is watching Israel's next move tonight as tensions between the country and its arch-enemy Iran escalate. Israel today vowing to respond after Iran launched hundreds of drones and missiles over the weekend. Iran says it's retaliation for Israel's deadly airstrike on Iran's embassy compound in Syria earlier this month, and that if Israel fires back, Iran will too. Western leaders scrambling to defuse the confrontation, but so far both sides are ignoring their calls. CTV's Adrian Gobriel reports from Turkey tonight on a dramatic and dangerous shadow conflict now in full view.
An entire region on the precipice of full-scale war.
Iran will face the consequences for its actions.
That confirmation from the Israeli Defense Forces has left the Middle East to brace for what could come, as desperate attempts by the West to tame Benjamin Netanyahu have for months now yielded little results.
We have been coordinating a diplomatic response to seek to prevent escalation.
The U.S. making it clear they won't take part in any retaliation. Israel is being urged by its allies to take its successful defense of Iran's unprecedented offensive as a win, with calls for calm echoing from across the Atlantic.
I have been clear to my counterpart in Israel, please take the win and make sure that we can work together to bring back peace in the region.
Over the weekend, roughly 170 attack drones, more than 120 ballistic missiles, and more than 30 cruise missiles were fired towards Israel from Iran, Iraq, Yemen, and Lebanon. This is no longer a proxy war. Saturday's bombardment marks Iran's first ever direct attack on Israel, a response to a deadly airstrike on an Iranian consulate building in Syria. Officials in Iran say they concluded the retaliatory operation. So today, they fired a clear warning. If action is taken by Israel, our actions will be more serious, proclaimed the spokesperson for Iran's foreign ministry.
Although the Middle East is thousands of miles away, it has a direct effect on our security and prosperity at home.
What has been viewed as a possibility for months now seems ever more probable as world leaders and the global community face the realization of potential war in the Middle East, the likes of which we've never witnessed before.
If Israel responds with force, the U.S., Canada, and other allies risk being drawn even further into this escalating conflict. And one of the fears here tonight in this region is that so far, neither side have shown they have the ability to concede. And Omar, therein lies the danger.
All right, Adrian, thank you. Let's bring in former Canadian diplomat Arif Lalani, who has held multiple positions in the Middle East, for some analysis. Mr. Lalani, Israel is saying it will respond to Iran's unprecedented retaliatory strike, but again today, no specifics on the course of action or the timeline. What is the calculation that Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu needs to make here?
I think Prime Minister Netanyahu needs to balance preserving Israel's right to respond to this attack on its soil versus focusing on the priority that Israelis have told the Prime Minister, which is to get hostages released from Gaza. So I think Iran's actions have given Israel some diplomatic capital, which they had lost in the last few days. So the question for the Prime Minister is, can he maintain strategic focus and deploy the diplomatic capital he has today towards the priority of Gaza and choose a response to Iran at a different time?
Now, despite the vow to respond, Israel's allies are urging restraint. How effective will Israel's biggest ally, the United States, be at achieving a de-escalation of tensions?
I think that depends on the ability of the Biden administration to focus on two things at the same time. The first is to continue to pressure and facilitate a ceasefire and a release of hostages. And the second is to broaden the strategic vision for the region so that Israel is able to live in a broader peace and stability within the region.
Former Canadian diplomat Arif Lalani in Ottawa for us tonight. Thank you so much. 21 pro-Palestinian protesters were arrested in Halifax today. They were taken into custody after blocking part of the roadway. Police say they're each facing a charge of obstructing a police officer, with some facing additional charges. Donald Trump made legal history in a Manhattan courtroom today as he took the defendant's seat for the start of his criminal trial. As CTV's Heather Wright reports, the biggest challenge so far, finding impartial jurors in a city that has a deep allegiance to the Democrats.
Day one of Donald Trump's hush money trial got underway this morning in Manhattan. A familiar cast of characters greeted the former president outside the courthouse as history was made inside, with Trump the only former U.S. president to face a criminal trial.
This is an assault on America. Nothing like this has never happened before.
Trump is charged with 34 counts of falsifying business records in relation to a $130,000 hush money payment his former attorney made to adult film star Stormy Daniels in the lead-up to the 2016 election. This is the first of 4 criminal prosecutions against Trump to make it to trial. Much of the morning was spent dealing with inflammatory comments Trump made over the weekend about his former attorney, Michael Cohen. The prosecution has asked for Trump to be found in contempt of court for violating a gag order barring him from attacking witnesses. That motion will be heard next week. Trump was warned by the judge he could be jailed if he misbehaves, disrupts the proceedings, or fails to appear in court throughout the trial, which could see the GOP's presumptive nominee testify in his own defense.
This case is as much for the courtroom as it is for the court of public opinion, and Trump is in the middle of an election year, and he will take the stand, and he will talk to the American people and those undecided voters.
Trump was described as appearing to fall asleep at one point, while also smiling at potential jurors. Jury selection could last up to 2 weeks, with each juror expected to fill out a questionnaire that includes their education, opinions of Trump, and the media they consume.
They're going to be focusing on people that do not have strong views, too much to the right or too much to the left. They want more mainstream.
More than half the jurors in today's first group were dismissed almost immediately after indicating they could not be impartial. This trial could last up to 8 weeks, meaning Trump could be tethered to a courtroom making limited campaign appearances until early June. Omar.
Heather Wright in Washington tonight. The FBI has opened a criminal investigation into the Baltimore bridge collapse that killed 6 people. Federal agents armed with search warrants boarded the 300-meter container ship involved in the crash. They will focus on the vessel, the actions of the crew, and whether there was a failure to report an earlier problem. Thunder Bay's police chief admitted today that last week's criminal charges against his predecessor have led to what he called an erosion of public trust. But as CTV's Kamil Karamali reports, what were supposed to be words of reassurance ended up igniting a clash.
Thunder Bay's police chief promising change.
That a chief of police needs to be honest and accountable.
But instead calls.
That's not true. You should apologize to these service members.
For an apology to police members who allege they've been abused for years.
For severely damaged individuals who brought these complaints forward to the chief, the board.
More than 2 years ago, multiple police officers came forward with allegations of corruption and human rights complaints. The former chief, Sylvie Hawk, and police lawyer Holly Walborn were questioned by the police board and Ontario's police watchdog. The Ontario Provincial Police were also brought in to investigate the local police force. Now the ex-police chief is facing breach of trust and obstruction charges. Court documents allege the former police chief and the in-house lawyer both made false or misleading statements, making it 3 police members arrested in recent months. All of this comes as the police force has faced scrutiny for the sudden deaths of Indigenous people in the last decade. The Anishinaabe-Aski Nation saying the Thunder Bay public and especially Indigenous people now have even more reason not to trust the police.
It's disappointing that
there hasn't been more progress made.
Here at the Fort William First Nation, there is hope that this is the beginning of a new road.
The truth is now starting to come out. We owe it to those people who had the courage to come forward.
The current police chief says they're cooperating with the OPP's ongoing investigation and hope to gain the public's trust back by modernizing the police force, while those police members charged say they look forward to defending themselves against these allegations. Omar.
All right, Connell, thank you. Police in Australia are investigating what they say is a terrorist attack captured on a live stream of a sermon at a church. CTV's Sarah Plowman on the horror and the teen suspect now in custody. And a warning, some of the images you're about to see are disturbing.
Face down and pinned down, churchgoers jumped from the pews to grab the attacker before police arrived. The bishop was live streaming his sermon when he was lunged at and stabbed. The attacker, police say, is 16 years old.
The consideration of all the material, I declared that it was a terrorist incident.
Police allege the teenager traveled to the church with a knife where he stabbed the bishop and the priest.
We believe there are elements that are satisfied in terms of religious motivated extremism.
Revenge, throwing bricks and concrete.
We've had police injured and taken to hospital overnight.
Australians were already reeling. 2 days earlier, a man brought a knife to a crowded Sydney mall, stabbing and killing shoppers before police gunned him down. Of the 6 people Joel Cauchi killed, 5 were women. His father says his son had schizophrenia and was frustrated he couldn't find a girlfriend.
Ziggy is a monster. To me, he was a very sick boy. Believe me, he was a very sick boy.
Among the injured is a 9-month-old baby girl who's in hospital. Her mother died protecting her.
She's moved from critical to serious. That is a big change and a significant improvement.
While no one was critically injured during the attack at the church, police say that the priest, bishop, and alleged attacker are undergoing surgery, that the teenager's hand was severely injured, and that he was known to police but was not on a terror watch list. Omar.
Terrifying moments. All right, Sarah, thank you. The chief weapons handler on the set of the movie Rust has been sentenced to 18 months in prison, the maximum possible.
But for you, Miss Hutchins would be alive, a husband would have his partner, and a little boy would have his mother.
In March, a jury convicted Hannah Gutierrez-Reed of involuntary manslaughter in the fatal on-set shooting of Helena Hutchins after Alec Baldwin had been practicing for a scene when the gun went off, discharging live rounds that killed the cinematographer. An alarming new snapshot tonight of a nationwide crisis. More than a quarter of all deaths in young people involved opioids in 2021. The overall number of opioid-related deaths, including all ages, doubled to more than 6,000 between 2019 and 2021, with the prairie provinces seeing the highest surge. The study notes the increase coincided with the pandemic, when people were more isolated and had limited access to social supports. The Liberals have announced economic supports ahead of tomorrow's federal budget, and with more than $38 billion in new programs already outlined, the focus will now turn on how the government pays for it. As CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver reports, there are predictions of a tax hike.
Across the country, Canadians are struggling with affordability, and Patricia LaRocque feels that stress every month.
I constantly have in the back of my head, like I'm one paycheck away from being homeless.
A single mom of 2, LaRocque says her grocery and utility bills keep rising, and if her rent does too, she may have to move.
What I can afford on my current rent, I believe when I was looking, it's not even a 1-bedroom.
Ottawa has announced more than $38 billion in housing and affordability measures, including $17 billion involving loans-based programs and $8 billion in new defense spending. Though today she was focused on the pre-budget tradition of purchasing new shoes, last week the finance minister said that new spending will not affect the deficit.
We are committed to adhering to those guideposts.
And that restricts Ottawa to a $40 billion deficit. The private sector economists say Ottawa won't likely be able to reach without cuts or tax hikes.
A big part of it could also come, or some part of it could also come from higher revenues, increasing taxes on corporations, things like excess profit taxes like they've used in other parts of the world, or increasing taxes on the wealthiest Canadians.
To compensate for new spending, Ottawa has ruled out tax hikes for the middle class, but not for the wealthiest Canadians.
I think there is zero appetite for increased taxes. A tax increase is bad in terms of public opinion, but it's also bad economically at this point.
The big budget numbers everyone will be looking for is the spending level and the deficit, Omar, specifically how it changes over the next few years.
All right, Annie, thank you. And a reminder, Bashie and I will be here to break down the politics and the numbers in tomorrow's budget, starting at 4 p.m. Eastern. You can watch live on CTV News Channel and ctvnews.ca. Coming up, turmoil at Tesla.
The magnitude of the cuts is troubling.
Why thousands of jobs are set to go at the car manufacturer. Plus, stepping inside the mind to battle an opioid crisis. Tesla has announced it will slash about 10% of its global workforce. Currently, the EV maker has more than 140,000 employees worldwide. The move comes as higher interest rates are slowing demand for electric vehicles and raising questions about whether Canada can meet its EV targets. Here's CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Geneviève Beauchemin.
To many Tesla drivers, their EV is still ahead of the curve. Eric Rondeau bought his first Tesla more than a decade ago.
And even, say, the car itself keeps evolving by software update on a regular basis. So this is quite unique.
But once seemingly unstoppable, Tesla is now slashing 14,000 jobs. Elon Musk reportedly writing to employees that there's nothing he hates more, but that it must be done. The EV maker has hit a series of roadblocks, facing increasing competition and declining sales. But Tesla's troubles also come as overall demand for battery-powered vehicles has slowed. The sector is, in fact, still growing, but the pace of growth is now more sluggish. This as Canada aims to have all cars sold in this country be electric by 2026.
If we don't address the barriers to electrification, it will be hard to reach the targets.
Among those barriers, the charging network.
We live in a very large country, and Canadians are exposed to cold weather. So because of that, we need government to build an even more comprehensive charging infrastructure network.
Another barrier is the price gap. EVs are on average $14,000 more. And with some government incentives set to wind down, some are pushing for new bonuses for EVs and restrictions for gas cars. As for Tesla, Honda is confident it's just a bump in the road.
So they're still ahead, and it will take time that, let's say, they are totally displaced.
And down the road, say analysts, competition will drive down prices, drive up demand. Geneviève Beauchemin, CTV News, Montreal.
Still ahead, savoring a golden moment. Canada's comeback at the Women's World Hockey Championship. Canada is relishing a thrilling golden triumph over their biggest adversary, the United States, reclaiming the Women's World Hockey title. With reaction to the victory, here's the newest member of our CTV National News team, Paul Hollingsworth.
A high-energy gold medal celebration for Canada at the Women's World Hockey Championship. Head coach Troy Ryan called it a showcase of poise and resilience.
It was a roller coaster ride for sure.
For the coaches, the players, and the fans, the ending of this game was a hockey dream sequence, an overtime goal for a gold medal win.
It was a wild one. Probably the craziest game I've been a part of, so we're happy to bring back gold to Canada.
Canada spent the past 12 months looking to rebound from last year's gold medal loss on home ice.
It's not about the Americans, it's not about Finland or any of our opponents. And when we kind of dive a little deeper into ourselves internally, we tend to get the best results.
Canada has won this tournament 3 times in 4 years. The Americans have captured gold 6 times since 2013.
This rivalry will continue to be even keeled. Over the last 7-8 years, it has been back and forth. And now with the launch of Professional Women's Hockey League, I think it's only going to continue to intensify the rivalry.
As these teams inch closer to another potential showdown at the 2026 Olympics. Paul Hollingsworth, CTV News, Halifax.
After the break, battling a drug crisis.
It talks about opioids, and it talks about where they come from and what impact it has on your brain, and then it talks about what your behavior can happen when you're ingesting those types of substances.
Going inside the brain to change minds. A mesmerizing teaching tool combating addiction is making its debut in Yukon. Struggling under the weight of the opioid crisis, the territory has opened up a new outside world to teenagers, now curious of its capabilities. Here's CTV's Heather Butts on the immersive experience inside the brain.
Walking into a massive dome, students are stepping inside the brain.
This changes our development.
Well, it kind of looked like you were actually inside your brain, which was actually pretty cool.
The immersive experience tells a story from creation through the development of the human brain, how it reacts to junk food, watching TikTok videos, toxic stress, and most importantly, to drugs.
So it talks about opioids, and it talks about where they come from and what impact it has on your brain, and then it talks about what your behavior can happen when you're ingesting those types of substances.
In a community hit hard by the toxic drug crisis, leaders are desperate to educate kids and save lives, with a program also focused on healing.
These are heavy conversations, so let's bring you back up. And it talks about what happens when you go drumming, what happens when you're out on the land fishing.
The Brain was a collaboration with more than a dozen community groups, medical experts, and artists, bringing this technology to Whitehorse.
You will remember that experience and the way it made you feel, and that's more important than anything.
They aim to reach teenagers with relevant examples.
It was actually pretty cool to know more about yourself and more about how your brain works.
Welcome to these lands nested on the banks of true Yukon River.
Designed and created for kids in the North, it touches on Indigenous culture, traditional teachings, and aspects of life here.
As artists, we figure out a way to communicate some of the world's issues, and I think we've done a great job at providing these youth with an experience that resonates.
They hope the Brain will inspire teenagers and spark a conversation that will spread across the country. Heather Butts, CTV News, Toronto.
And that's a snapshot of this Monday. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Good night, and see you tomorrow.
usually end in actual death. Former Navy SEAL and FBI agent Jonathan Gilliam joins me now. Jonathan, I've seen a real massive uptick in some of this violent rhetoric. The FBI doesn't really seem to be that involved. Biden's been silent. Are they going soft because of politics?
Well, I think they've gone soft because of ideology, and that's the reality of this. Politics is just a part of the toolbox that the left uses. These activists, those are another part of it. They use careerists as well that are in the federal government and state and local governments. They use those individuals who have hooked their wagons to the left or to whoever's in office that want to get up in rank in these different agencies. So they have all these different tools in their toolbox that they can use. And I find it very interesting what you were just saying about the Hamas leg of the Democrat Party. Well, that's how Hezbollah actually came about in their power in Lebanon, is that they started off as activists, then gained over 60% of the government. So, you know, these are tactics that they use that are proven. And as we see here, one person in a city council meeting can determine that somebody did something illegal and the cops will go after that girl who made that threat. But yet all these people make these threats every day, all day, and nobody, including the FBI or state and local governments and law enforcement, are doing anything about it.
How does it take so long to get these freaks off the bridge?
how did they get on the bridge? Because that's the reality of this. If this was conservatives or pro-lifers, this would be called insurrection, or it would be called a national security issue, or some kind of threat to our rights in this country. The reality is, again, this is another tool in their toolbox. They get out there, they do these things over and over again. They cause enough trouble to where law enforcement, when it occurs, they try to tiptoe around it and not hurt anybody because it's going to end up on the news. And so they've crafted all these tactics, and that's the way that they work.
Yeah, I just don't block bridges in Philly. That's not going to end well. I know a few guys, they won't put up with that. Jonathan, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hot...
Andy McCarthy, former federal prosecutor and Fox News contributor. Andy, good to have you here. I do want to ask you about this Trump courtroom beginning today, the trial beginning today, and this jury selection process. We're just watching a whole bunch of New Yorkers in action here on the right-hand side of the screen. Can they put together an unbiased jury in this case, Andy?
Yeah, I think it'll take a long time, but I like Manhattan jurors. But watching your split screen, Martha, I have to say, in 1995, I tried terrorists in a courthouse about 3 minutes away from the Brooklyn Bridge, and we played a tape where they said if the battalions of jihad would do 3 or 4 operations like they did to the Marines in Lebanon, talking about Hezbollah, America would leave the region. And the jury audibly gasped. So how you go from that to Hezbollah flags in Lower Manhattan is just, it's a cultural tragedy, actually, to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, this is not far from the site of the World Trade Center. Right. It's not far from the case that you just pointed out that you worked on with the first attempt at the Twin Towers, where an explosive was blown up in the parking garage and killed people in that situation. And now we are living in an environment where you have a lot of people who are promoting some of these groups. Now, most of these people are talking about the Palestinian people, but as we said, we're seeing Hamas flags, Hezbollah flags. This is Oakland, California, that we're seeing here. Andy, as you watch, all of this, thoughts on how this is coordinated? Or if it's coordinated?
Well, I think it's absolutely coordinated, and the reason is that you have Muslim Brotherhood organizations that have been planting their flag in the United States since the middle 1960s, particularly the Muslim Students Associations. And if you let that go on for 60 years and watch it metastasize, and then you decide, in addition to that, to basically obliterate your border so all the crazies can come in and find each other, you can't be too surprised that we have a situation. I mean, it's infuriating, but it's not all that surprising.
It's kind of rich, right? That you've got this courtroom situation where the former president is on trial for something that most observers look at and say, well, how is this misdemeanor now a felony and an election violation by a local prosecutor? How's that even happening? But he's going to be in the courtroom till June, Andy, as they try to find him guilty on this stuff, as you watch what else is going on in Manhattan. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, he's going to be in this courtroom till June, and then they'll have another courtroom and probably another forum to be in after that.
It's really stunning. And this is the America that we find ourselves in as we head towards the election, a presidential election of 2024. A lot for folks across the nation to sort out and listen to and think about. Andy McCarthy, my thanks to you for joining us this afternoon.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling.
The first criminal trial of a former president gets underway.
Trump is not above the law.
Jury selection begins in the case of the people of the state of New York versus Donald J. Trump. The questions potential jurors are being asked and how many have already been dismissed.
Nothing like this has never happened before. There's never been anything like it.
The CBS Evening News starts now. Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for being with us. We want to show the dramatic pictures today from San Francisco and the Golden Gate Bridge, where pro-Palestinian protesters shut down one of the most iconic bridges in America for nearly 5 hours. It was part of a worldwide economic blockade. We'll get to that story in just a moment, but we do want to begin tonight with the first criminal prosecution of a former president of the United States. The so-called hush money trial of Donald Trump is underway, with nearly 100 potential jurors being questioned on the first day. None were picked today. Jury selection could take up to 2 weeks. Trump is facing 34 felony counts for falsifying business records in order to hide an alleged affair with former porn star Stormy Daniels. As he left court, a clearly angry Trump lashed out at the judge, who said he's expected to be there every day, and this trial could last 8 weeks. CBS Robert Costa starts us off tonight.
A history-making moment in Lower Manhattan this morning.
Very honored to be here.
Donald Trump had his rights read to him by New York Judge Juan Merchan, acknowledging he understood and officially became the first former president ever to stand criminal trial. During the proceedings, Trump appeared irritated at times and bored at others, even appearing to nod off at one point. Later perking up when jury selection began, turning to face potential jurors as they filed into the courtroom. The juror questionnaire posed 42 questions, including if they've ever attended a Trump rally, or if they follow the former president on social media. More than half of the 96 prospective jurors questioned today were excused, many after saying they could not be fair and impartial.
This is going to be a difficult task because there is virtually no one who has no opinion about Donald Trump. Whether you voted for him or you voted against him, you still have an opinion about the criminal case against him.
Trump is accused of scheming to funnel payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels through his former lawyer Michael Cohen. Both, along with former aide Hope Hicks, are expected to be called as witnesses. Prosecutors say it was an attempt to stop an alleged past affair with Daniels from becoming a scandal just before the 2016 presidential election. Trump has denied both the affair and making the payments.
Did you know about the $130,000 payment from Daniels?
The former president slammed Cohen and Daniels on social media last week, calling them sleazebags. And today, attorneys with the Manhattan DA's office asked the judge to hold the former president in contempt and fine him $3,000 for violating a gag order. Trump also complained the judge rejected his request to skip court to travel to Washington in 10 days for the landmark Supreme Court arguments on presidential immunity.
And won't allow me to leave here for a half a day, go to D.C. and go before the United States Supreme Court because he thinks he's superior, I guess, to the Supreme Court.
Sources close to Trump's legal team tell me that Trump's lawyers will soon push for a change in venue, arguing Trump can't get a fair hearing in New York. For now, Trump will be at this court tomorrow for jury selection. The judge says he has no choice. Nora.
Robert Costa, thank you very much. Tonight, the chief of staff for the Israeli military announced there will be a response to Iran's unprecedented large-scale drone and missile attack over the weekend. CBS's Deborah Patta reports on how the alliance of Western and Arab countries came together for the first time to defend the Jewish state.
A fiery display of Iran's aerial might choreographed for maximum effect, resulting in minimal damage. More than 300 projectiles were launched. First came over 170 drones and 30 cruise missiles, all shot down before reaching Israel, with help from US aircraft in Jordan and Saudi Arabia that took out nearly 80 drones. Then came 120 ballistic missiles, around half failed to launch or crashed in flight. Only 5 pierced through Israel's powerful air defense system, causing minor damage to a military base. Israel's war cabinet favors retaliation, but differs on timing and scale, while the Israel Defense Force is on standby. We are weighing our steps, IDF Chief Hefzi Halevi said. The launch of so many missiles and drones towards Israel will be responded to. The attack has triggered global calls for restraint.
It's time to step back from the brink.
Under pressure at home, critics of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu question whether he's the right person to make such a critical decision.
So if you ask me if Netanyahu is a risk to the state of Israel, my opinion is yes.
Retired two-star IDF General Nimrod Sheffer says Netanyahu has a vested interest in prolonging both the war in Gaza and escalating the conflict with Iran in order to stay in power.
If you're retaliating just to show that you're strong enough, it's the wrong idea. It's the wrong strategy.
Sheffer told us Israel could respond with a cyber attack, a targeted strike, or hitting an Iranian proxy like Hezbollah, but he believes the best course of action is not to retaliate, as Israel has already won by demonstrating its powerful defense capabilities. Nora?
Deborah Patta in Jerusalem, thank you. Back here in Washington, the White House is reiterating its unwavering support for Israel. President Biden is urging caution ahead of any Israeli counterattack. CBS's Weijia Jiang reports the president is also facing pressure here at home with protests shutting down parts of major cities across the country.
From San Francisco to Chicago, protesters in several major cities blocked traffic, demanding an end to the war in Gaza, dialing up pressure for President Biden to do the same. In New York City, some even waved a Hezbollah flag, showing condemnation for Israel. The protests were planned before Iran launched an unprecedented assault on Israel. Today, as Biden hosted the Prime Minister of Iraq in the Oval Office, he stressed U.S. support of Israel, but acknowledged fears that responding to Iran could widen the war.
We're committed to a ceasefire that will bring the hostages home and preventing conflict from spreading beyond what it already has.
CBS News has learned that during a phone call Saturday night, President Biden urged Prime Minister Netanyahu to think carefully and strategically about the risks of escalation, and said that if the IDF launched a reprisal strike on Iran, the U.S. would not participate. Biden issued this warning to Iran just one day before the strikes.
Don't.
Tehran went ahead anyway.
Does that signal to Iran that it can defy the U.S. without facing any consequences?
If I'm sitting in Tehran and I'm taking a look at what just happened on Saturday night, I don't think I'd be betting that the United States is not willing to get engaged here and help defend Israel.
House Speaker Mike Johnson says the House would soon vote on aid for Israel in light of the Iranian attack. Tonight, the White House says it opposes any measure that focuses solely on Israel as it pushes Congress to pass a package that also includes money for Ukraine and border security. Nora?
Weijia Jiang at the White House with those tough questions today. Thank you very much. It could be another week of wild weather with severe thunderstorms sweeping across the Ohio Valley to the Mid-Atlantic. For where the threats are for the rest of the night and tomorrow, let's bring in meteorologist Mike Bettis. He's with our partners at the Weather Channel. Good evening, Mike.
Nora, good evening. We'll keep a very close eye on the potential for severe storms right through the evening in many locations, including right here through the Mid-Atlantic, in areas like Charleston, in places like Richmond, even out toward Ocean City. 70-mile-per-hour winds and also 2-inch diameter hail could be possible in these locations. We'll see storms right through the night tonight, racing down I-95, eventually down through the Hampton Roads area, before finally clearing overnight off the Atlantic Ocean. Then we turn our attention back to the middle of the country, where through tonight we have a tornado count as high as 5 medium chances for tornadoes extend from the high plains all the way down through Texas. The high-resolution future radar shows a lot of storms popping up around dinner time, after dinner time, and right through the night tonight. That storm threat translates into the Midwest, Nora, as we go today on Tuesday.
Mike Bettis, thank you. A New Mexico judge today handed down the maximum sentence of 18 months in prison to the weapons supervisor on the set of the Alec Baldwin movie Rust. Hannah Gutierrez-Reed was found guilty last month in the accidental shooting death of the film's cinematographer, Helena Hutchins. CBS's Elise Preston reports on what this could mean for Baldwin's upcoming trial.
A handcuffed Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, the chief weapons handler on the troubled movie set Rust, wiped away tears as she listened to gut-wrenching impact statements.
A live bullet should never have made its way onto the set, let alone the gun. Full stop. And that is where Hannah Gutierrez-Reed as the armorer on Rust failed Helena.
The jury found the 27-year-old armorer guilty of involuntary manslaughter in the 2021 fatal shooting of the film's cinematographer, Helena Hutchins. She was struck by a live round from the gun held by actor Alec Baldwin. Live ammunition mistakenly loaded by Gutierrez-Reed.
Ms. Gutierrez continues to refuse to accept responsibility for her role in the death of Helena Hutchins.
The special prosecutor said Gutierrez-Reed had shown no contrition, citing nearly 200 jailhouse phone calls in which she described the jury as idiots, accused the judge of being paid off, and wanting to put Alec Baldwin in jail.
The jury has found me in part at fault for this god-awful tragedy.
But that doesn't make me a monster. That makes me human.
Despite her plea for leniency, the judge handed down the maximum 18-month prison sentence.
You alone turned a safe weapon into a lethal weapon. Please take her.
The family of Gutierrez Reed plans to appeal as Alec Baldwin prepares for his trial.
What Alec Baldwin is going to argue is this is a tragedy and the person responsible has already been found guilty and is already in prison.
In today's statements, loved ones of Hutchins called for accountability for everyone involved in her death. Baldwin also faces involuntary manslaughter charges, but he's maintained his innocence. His trial is scheduled for July. Nora?
Elise Preston, thank you very much. We learned today that the FBI opened a criminal investigation and boarded the cargo ship that crashed into Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge last month. 6 construction workers were killed when the bridge collapsed. The body of a 4th worker was recovered from a sunken vehicle on Sunday. The FBI isn't discussing the scope of its investigation, but a source tells the Associated Press the ship apparently had electrical problems before it left port, but took off anyway. Major developments now in the disappearance of 2 mothers from Kansas. Police believe their bodies have been found and 4 people are under arrest. We get details in this disturbing case from CBS's Mark Strassman.
Heartbreak in the heartland. Investigators say the 2-week search for Veronica Butler and Jillian Kelly is over.
This case did not end the way we had hoped. It has certainly been a tragedy for everybody involved.
The Kansas moms went missing March 30th while going to pick up Butler's children in Oklahoma. Their car was left abandoned on the side of a rural road. Blood and a broken hammer found nearby.
We felt this wasn't a random bill, all right? We felt that with some of the information coming in that it was more targeted.
On Saturday, 4 people were arrested in connection to the case. Tad Cullum, Tiffany Adams, and Cole and Cora Twombly, all charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy. In an affidavit released today, police say Adams was the paternal grandmother of Butler's children, and the 2 were locked in a custody battle. Police also say Adams bought 5 stun guns at a local gun shop and 3 burner phones, all of which pinged near where Butler's car was found and at a property 8.5 miles away, where police found a freshly dug hole covered by hay.
This case was tragic. You have 2 people who are dead and 4 people that committed an absolutely brutal crime.
Police said the 4 belonged to an anti-government group and had tried to kill Butler before. Nora, they'll be in court on Wednesday.
Such a disturbing story, Mark Strassman. Thank you. Now to some breaking news from the U.S. Supreme Court. The High Court is allowing Idaho to largely enforce its ban on gender-affirming care for transgender children under 18, while lawsuits over the law go forward. Justice Clarence Thomas was not in court today and did not participate remotely in arguments. There was no explanation given for his absence. All eyes are on tonight's WNBA draft. Iowa's Caitlin Clark and the other stars who are changing the game. Tonight's WNBA draft is one of the most anticipated in history. Iowa superstar Caitlin Clark leads an incoming class of players who are taking the game to new heights on and off the court. From record points to record TV ratings, these incredible women are doing it all. CBS's Jan Crawford takes a look.
With the first pick in the 2024 WNBA draft, the Indiana Fever select Caitlin Clark, University of Iowa.
It was like a coronation tonight in Brooklyn, things reaching a fever pitch as excitement over women's basketball continues to scale dizzying heights.
A little different than Iowa? A little.
As expected, Caitlin Clark, chosen number 1 overall, following an historic season where she shattered Division I scoring records.
Brady gets denied. Cardozo gobbles it up.
But it was Camila Cardozo and the University of South Carolina who capped their undefeated season with the title. And Cardozo, named the game's most outstanding player, also went high in the draft, along with 2021 national champion Cameron Brink of Stanford and 2023 champion Angel Reese of LSU. But all season, Clark's been the headline, and now the WNBA is seeking to make the most of it, as she helps elevate women's basketball on the court and off.
You make a lot of jokes about women's sports, don't you, Michael?
I wouldn't say a lot, but...
Over the weekend, Clark made a surprise appearance on Saturday Night Live, giving a shout-out to those who paved the way.
Thanks to all the great players like Cheryl Swoops, Lisa Leslie, Cynthia Cooper, the great Dawn Staley, and my basketball hero, Maya Moore. These are the women that kicked down the door so I could walk inside.
Now, even before the draft, teams in the WNBA were marketing Clark's games with the Indiana Fever to try to build on that Caitlin effect, and ticket prices have quadrupled in the resale market. If you can't get a ticket, 36 of Indiana's 40 regular season games will be on national television. Last year, Nora, ESPN only had 1.
Things are changing. Jan Crawford, thank you so much. A tax day computer glitch prevents some H&R Block customers from filing their tax returns. It is tax day. We've got the details next. A computer glitch temporarily blocked some H&R Block taxpayers from filing their returns today as the tax day deadline approached. The tax preparation company said there was a problem with its downloadable desktop software. H&R Block says the vast majority of its customers use the online version and were unaffected. The company says the problem has been fixed. Heart of America is next with an effort to bridge the gap for black baseball players on this annual Jackie Robinson Day.
This portion of the CBS Evening News is sponsored by Freshpet. It's not dog food, it's food food.
Finally, tonight's Heart of America. On opening day this year, just 6% of players were black, the fewest in decades, according to the MLB. And as the country celebrates Jackie Robinson's legacy today, a group in Chicago is working to give the next generation of black players a chance at living their field of dreams. Here's CBS's Charlie DeMar.
77 years after Jackie Robinson blazed the trail for black players, coaches like Ernest Horton know the work is far from over.
If the grassroots are suffering and there's no baseball being played in the communities, of course it's not going to be black baseball players in MLB.
Horton is a public schools teacher in Chicago.
I can see it there.
He started Black Baseball Media, an organization giving players from predominantly underserved communities access to top-notch facilities and exposure to college scouts.
Seeing is believing. Everyone's drinking the Kool-Aid.
High school senior Kamari Thomas will play in college.
So will Demir Heidelberg, aiming to follow in the footsteps of current black big leaguers, but the teens say there are often barriers.
What difference does that make having that access? It's a huge difference because usually kids like with my skin color, they can't get into it because they don't either have the money or they don't have the exposure to it. What message does that send to you? How does that sit?
It's time for everybody to get their boots on the ground. It's time to unite. We can't sit here on the sideline and complain about it.
Bridging baseball's racial divide for the next generation. Charlie DeMar, CBS News, Crestwood, Illinois.
We need more coaches like Ernest Horton, and that's why he's tonight's Heart of America. Thank you. And that's tonight's CBS Evening News. I'm Nora O'Donnell tonight. Yes, in coordination with extraordinary, had dozens of U.S. and Israeli fighters in the air. The U.S. fighters alone shooting down with 80 armed drones with PC missiles. There were refueling tankers in the air, ships at sea, launching anti-ballistic missiles all the while tracking with 300 missiles launched by Iran. It's so many moving parts together, they still managed to stop those missiles and drones and not shoot each other down. But despite that success, America will not be involved in assisting with any Israeli attack on Iran, not airway refueling, nothing. The senior U.S. officials warning that Israel is intent on responding, adding that the world may think this is over, it is not. David? Well, the U.S. would be just on a dozen of U.S. missiles launched. The head of Command updated that they expected more than 100 officials were update, saying he was so shocked his hands were trembling and never down.
Tonight in Syracuse, New York, shock and outrage after 2 law enforcement officers were killed in shootouts.
This is Arbor Center.
Around 17 yesterday, according to Syracuse police officers attempted to salvage Syracuse vehicle. Drivers away from near the officers tracking car and locating at home in Pennsylvania, calling for backup from the County Sheriff's Office.
When they were checking the vehicle, they heard it sound like a gun being engaged. So the car, we have an officer down in the yard, and then our officer was taken out by a suspect. The officer, however, did fire. One of the officers, one of the suspect.
Officer Michael Benson and Deputy Lieutenant Michael South Russian Hospital in critical condition. Both later died of their injuries. Both officers heartbroken. Sending salute to remember fallen heroes. The suspect also killed. Today, County District Attorney identifying him as 33 for armor feet. Today, the police say they're still bringing evidence from the scene. The New York Attorney General is also investigating.
Donald Trump's statement had court today, watching the process of bringing down the pool of hundreds to a jury of 12 with 6 alternates. People will soon see the judgment of the former president, the first to ever face a criminal trial. 200 people signed the courthouse today, watching other battlements, media references, and views of Mr. Trump in deep blue Manhattan, they were swiftly dismissed for saying they cannot be impartial. The judge read home 6 of the unprecedented moment for the GOP nominee. When Mr. Trump today, he fails to show up, he risks arrest. Mr. Trump is leading all the guilty. The report found falsely, but the story prosecutors seek to tell more short and sweeping. Previewing their second campaign today, by release of the evidence as a Hollywood tape. Viewing Mr. Trump's determination, prosecutors saying, divide silence story Daniels. Allegedly breaking White House pay $130,000 to Chicago public saying she had sex with Mr. Trump, something King Haynes never happened. The former president later repeated checks, allegedly doctoring companies' internal records to cover all up.
That payment was a high damage agent from the public. The Justice team will
The judge believed prosecutors cannot play games to take the trial, but can introduce what he said. Mr. Trump's team expected to highlight how the DA and federal prosecutors declined to press charges in this case. While Mr. Trump lamented the case as a Democratic conspiracy for reelection chances. The trial is expected to stretch on 6 to 8 weeks to hear testimony from Cohen, Daniels, members of Trump's inner circle like former aide Hicks, and possibly Mr. Trump himself. The risk of cross-examination is substantial, but the more immediate threat, possible allegations of the gag were presenting Mr. Trump from attacking trial witnesses.
I've already spoken a lot about the calendar. This is the first criminal case Mr. Trump faces this year.
Yes, I think it's other criminal cases across major jurisdictions, but none of those deal with the latest trial cases. This is man, maybe only one. Never seen to trade for him, but in the meantime, jurisdiction will continue for the next couple days, not weeks, Professor.
Roger, thank you. How Jackson, how legal is there? Is it political as Mr. Trump as this trial plays out?
Yes, right. The DOC uses this political advantage, and unfortunately, the issues while will be around them, they also raise money easy fundraising of this case against that. But keep in mind, we are in general election now, and this is going to be independence. But having that, these charges are serious. Those will just if Mr. Trump is convicted, President Biden is given to senior clearly frustrated. He has to be able to proceedings. But all highlights just how extraordinary this is. It will not cost the court, and the campaign trail is Donald Trump candidate, inexcusable from Donald Trump, the criminal defendant. Professor.
All right, Jackson, Israel saying they will respond. Everyone wants to rise missiles and drones, almost all of them shut down by Israel. Which angle is Israel release?
40 hours after Iran attacked Israel with hundreds of drones and missiles, Israel site is now just strike back. Israeli officials telling news for response could be imminent. While Korea base, the only known damage Israel. The chief of staff of the Israeli army today said,
"You know, we face the consequences for actions. We will choose our response accordingly."
That announcement came after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held the second war cabinet meeting in 2 days. Throughout his career, Netanyahu has advocated for tough approaches against Iran, including military action. And this is Israeli officials telling news that the cabinet agreed that a military response is needed to show Iran, but that it should avoid provoking a regional war and be coordinated with the United States. Easier said than done. Israel's response to respond, even though President Biden told Netanyahu not to escalate further, because with the U.S. help shut down 99% of Iran's missiles and drones. The U.S. even led a hastily organized coalition to defend Israel, that included Jordan and the UK. The day before Iran's attack, President Biden warned Iran not to strike. But Iran isn't the scene either. Soon after, the Iranian drone missiles were aimed for Israel. We watched Israeli missile defenses were enacted over Jerusalem's old city, holy for billions of Jews, Christians, and Muslims.
The last time we see there, streaking all across the skies over Jerusalem, now for the first time, very Cyrus.
The Pentagon said it shot down 100 of the drones. Iran says it's done, that Iran should its only response to Israel's deadly airstrike on Iran's MC compound in Syria. But Iran warned today that any Israeli reprisal would be met by immediate counterstrike. There are fears that the long-running shadow war between Iran and Israel is waiting out the deal with the United States right in the middle.
And there's still anxiety and real escalation for tonight.
There absolutely is. There had been a sense here that after Israel, the U.S. shut down nearly all of Iran's incoming drones and missiles, the crisis could be contained. Yet once again, the Middle East is on edge, racing for possible regional war. And these next couple days will be critical as Israel calibrates its response.
I agree with Jerusalem, thank you. So the White House started away why war would be after Iran's attack on Israel. Protests goes to your home against President Biden's policies in the Israel-Hamas war. We have more forgiving zeros. The pressure is mounting on the administration over war in Gaza. Hundreds of Palestinian protesters today watched that more broken several deaths. We say protesters in Chicago, air national places, substantially traveled. In San Francisco, they bridge multiple arrests. Protesters tried there for hours. But in President Biden called the president military effort to defend Israel. Together with our partners, we defeated that attack. In North today, he made a rock on Israel, trying to de-escalate tensions in the Middle East. We're prepared to ceasefire, that will bring conflict from spreading beyond the road yet. The president told Prime Minister Netanyahu this week following Iran attack, urging restraint. A senior official just President Netanyahu to take the win. And although Iran has committed to defend Israel, it's unclear that the U.S. will now participate in offensive operations against Iran. That's like if Israel retaliates against Iran. Today, White House strategy not provide news to the U.S. Now it's time for Washington attack Israel. Some of the Biden administration has emboldened Iran. It sounds like the allies, partners, and international effort to impose many cause all around. And in the middle of this, there are new questions about a U.S. aid package for Israel. Yes, Justice Mike Johnson's 15 intense pressure to bring Israel and Ukraine for Israel for months. He told you longer than they do this week. Start bills. No, thank you. Now, the West movie said shooting the farmer and Gutierrez sentenced 18 months in prison. She was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter for killing Senator Arlene Hutchins. Gutierrez made an emotional plea for the judge gave her the maximum sentence, citing her lack of remorse. Also, tonight we're watching what could be days of severe weather was seen in Arlington, Virginia. There was large hail this afternoon. Threat continues tonight. All over here in Alabama and Midwest are starting. We got way out. We thank you. The FBI is under a criminal investigation of a cargo ship that slammed the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore last month. Federal agents boarded the nearly 1,000 ship this morning with search warrants. Sources say the investigation will be with fourth class and possible mechanical problems. In 60 seconds, the details behind 2 months killed Oklahoma. The others police looking at 84 suspects, including grandmother of one of the victim's children. Plus, one investigator found the suspect's search history. Next.
Geçen sene diyordum çok zor ama başardım elhamdülillah. Başardım elhamdülillah. Şükürler olsun Rabbime. Çok zordu ama başardım.
Onlar dedi bana yapamazsın zor. Cehennem oldu içimde yanım kor. Gerçeği söyle lütfen bana doktor. Kalpleri değil kırıyorum rekor. Şükürler olsun. Hayat çok zorsun ama pes etmem asla. Zirveye kalsa.
Two Kansas women believing missing moms whose bodies were found in Oklahoma today. 4 people in custody this evening. Sandrock has one possible motive.
After all, research from Kansas and 27-year-old Veronica, 39-year-old GMT, 39-year-old Florida, 2 bodies in Oklahoma believed to be missing moms.
I mean, I would express our constituency, family loved ones, around 5 million.
The pair of a small Kansas town like Marshall Show. Think about the sugar presentation of the party. Held only their supervised visit. When they did show the party, Butler's family one week found Short Car, which uncovered evidence of severe injury, including blood or away. Butler's last is never hammer.
It's absolutely devastating. There was young and vibrant and things are more.
Now, 4 people behind bars charged with murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy, including children's women, Tiffany Adams, who reported 6 years old months to State investigators saying the women purchased 5 cell nuts and 3 prepaid cell phones. Those phones then came to the last location of Butler and Kelly. At the time of the disappearance, according to police. The team got over the suspects, saying authorities responded for the self-proclaimed they called God's visits, and told the police those plans, but they could not afford about Butler. And so the suspects who remained behind bars and now the Science House. Police say Butler's children at the center of the Institute are out of harm's way. Lester.
Sandrock, thank you. We're back on the alarming news about coral reefs worldwide and Indian health. Plus, the tourist scene on camera damage part of National Park. Life officials are asking the public health to define it. We're back on the alarming news about our changing seas. Two scientific groups saying today that coral reefs are experiencing a worldwide bleaching event. It's all breaking ocean temperatures bleaching can lead to mass coral death. Experts warn this could be a worse event like this ever recorded. Also, time video of 2 men damaging ancient rock formations during the West. Now authorities are asking the public health find them. It's just the latest statement of visitors damaging sensitive sites. News Court says more.
It's a well-known video. 2 men seen damaging ancient rock formations at the National Recreation Area outside Las Vegas. The vandals not once but twice knocking massive boulders off the cliff at the popular Redstone Trail. A young girl standing behind them screams out as the rocks come tumbling down. Authorities of the National Park are now investigating and see the public's health to track down the 2 men. According to the park's website, the rocks are millions of years old. Officials say vandalism and federally protected sites. Critical and felony charges, including fines and jail time. That behavior is something park rangers have been dealing with for years. In 2013, Boy Scouts leaders cheered at the popular range of rock formation in Utah. Then accepted severe probation and fine. More recently, in 2022, National Park reported widespread vandalism. People being graffiti on historic sandstone. Rangers posted this video cleaning up the spray paint. Now officials are responsible for the irreparable damage they need. Remember that breaking park rules comes with consequences. Unless this is serious, that's where the park officials can potentially $7 months to $1,000 fines.
Okay, thank you. And that's going to be the news for this Monday. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'm Lester. Please take care of yourself and each other. Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Woodman. Have a good life.